Okay, we've thoroughly washed the case, you can see, and now we're going to knock out the case bush which is in here. So we've got a driver, and we just grab the hammer. There we go, knocked out the old bush and we've got the new bush. Now same thing, we're going to just drive that in. And it's basically just level with the case there. The idea is because the planetary gear's on the other side, and that's the heaviest part of the what that bush is carrying, you want to have the bush as close as or further as it can go, close to the heavy part that it's carrying. So you want it, in this case, as deep as you can in that way. You can see roughly where that bush sits. When the planetary and the drum are together, the bush will probably sit about there. So we're going to linish that surface there, make sure it's nice and smooth on the lathe, and then we can start putting it back together. On that drum there is a bush as well. In this situation it looks okay. I've just tested it and that one runs on that part out there. It doesn't look too bad. Now I've just removed the torrington bearing, or the needle bearing, and the skid plates off the planetary, just so while I'm linishing up that surface nothing flies off at me. Another good idea is to just check, there is supposed to be a little bit of end float in there, in those gears. Just check that the gears are all okay and there are no little wear marks. Once it goes through the case hardening there's quite soft metal there, so just make sure it hasn't gone through the case hardening anywhere. And this one doesn't look too bad. You'll see like there'll be little scratch marks or wear marks there if it has. And you can see the little skid plate there and a little bronze thrust washer. So we're just going to linish up that surface there a little bit, and then we can start putting that back together. While I'm doing that, I'll also just linish that drum up as well, just there, make sure it's nice and smooth. You can see there are some marks there where the band's been rubbing or running, but apart from that it looks okay. Like I said before, that bush there looks okay, so we're not going to replace that one in this situation. Nice and smooth, you can see. I haven't washed it off yet. We'll just wash it in the solvent as well. But if you don't have a lathe, you can just do this by hand. Just has some very fine wet and dry, and you can just rub it on there in a circular motion. And the drum as well I've done. You can see still haven't cleaned it off, but it's taken out those little groove marks where the band was running before. Before we put the planetary and the band back in, we're going to put the governor support in. Now, one good habit to get into whenever you're replacing sealing rings is to always test the new rings in the bore. Quite often on modern day transmissions they have quite a series of rings, and it's sometimes quite easy, or the ring size is very similar, so it's quite easy to put the wrong ring in the wrong place. But you can see that one It's got bugger all wear in it there. That's a new one. And I'll grab that's one of the old ones. And just put it in. And you can see there's a tiny little gap there. So, just a good habit. Always test the rings, sealing rings in the bore that you're going to put them into, just to make sure that they're the right ones and that they're not worn or anything like that. And when you're putting the sealing rings back on with your circlip pliers, it's quite often it's very easy to just break them. So what we do is we actually you just sort of grip it to the side with your fingers just to support it so it doesn't break, and then you just slowly work it down until it goes into its respective groove there. There we go. And then we just put the locks back on. Sometimes it's pretty hard to put on. They're a bit tight. Can't do it with the camera in the way. But anyway, you see what I mean when you're putting that little lock joint back on. And we can put that governor support back on. And we just slowly work it down because the rings have got to find its way in there. So you don't just force it down, you can break the rings. And there we go. And this one had the little filter, so we put the filter back in. Just pushes in like so. And we put the skid plate and the torrington in first. You can stick it with a bit of petroleum jelly or vaseline. Put that in first. And in. You can't put that in the wrong way. Make sure you've soaked it in oil for at least 20 minutes before you put it in. And now we can put the drum in. You can see how it's nicely linished. Put that in first. And just sort of work it through the band. Okay. Now we've got to make sure we put the torrington bearing and the skid plate back in the planetary gear in there. And you can see the torrington in there. And now we just slowly put that in. You've got to just align those lines a little bit and support that governor support as you're working it in. There we go. Remember to put the pointy end out as you're putting that circlip back on. It'll just be easier to hold on in your circlip pliers. Always a good idea when you put a circlip on is to just spin it a little bit. That way you know it's fallen right in the groove properly. And there we go. So that part's all back together. And now we can spin that around and not be worried about everything falling out. Now we've got the skid plate that goes in the planetary there, in the torrington bearing. And you can see that one's worn on one side. We're going to flip it over by 180 degrees, put it in there. We're just going to put a little bit of Vaseline on it just so it holds it. Torrington bearing as well. Okay, we can move on to the clutch packs now. Okay, here we've got the second drum, and you can see inside there we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 friction clutch plates. There is a little mod that we do, and we actually put 9 clutch plates in this clutch pack just to make it a little bit heavier duty. So we do that by putting a narrower spacer in here. So we'll just pull this apart now and just replace the seals in there. I've just got the annulus off, the circlip. And there we've got the clutch pack. And there's a waved, I don't know if you can see that, there's a waved cushion spring or cushion plate that goes up against the piston there, just to absorb a bit of that shock as it's applied. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clutch plates, friction clutch plates, and that's about 1 inch and 90 thou. So by increasing the number of clutch plates, you actually increase the surface area, being able to lock up that clutch pack. So basically the more clutches you put in there, the stronger it is. Now we've just got our little spring compressor there. There we go. You can see the springs in there. We'll just take that out now. Take out the circlip, the little spring retainer, and we've got all the springs. And we're left with the piston there. That piston will just come out. There we go. One other thing we need to check, that the Teflon rings run in here, in this drum, but there is a bush here. So what we do is we actually test that on the pump. Just make sure you got the little selective thrust washer there. And you can see it's pretty flogged out, so we'll just replace that bush as well. Just to get a rough, I can't get the verniers in there, but yeah, I was just going to measure it up. So we'll just knock out that bush, put another bush in, clean this clutch pack out. Important to right down here where these little slots are, there'll be a lot of fine metal accumulated in there, so you need to get a little piece of wire or something. We use a thin screwdriver and just scrape it in there, and then blast it out with the solvent. You don't want that sort of staying in there and circulating through the transmission. If you can get it as clean as possible, it is handy. Just make a note of is how deep that bush goes down. You can see that little slot there. The bush is basically level with that slot. If you go too far down, what will actually happen is the bush will hit that little step there where the ring is, and it won't allow it to go down properly. So you want it to sit on the little thrust washer, not on the bush. So it is important, like I said, to push the bush as far in as possible, especially where the heaviest part of the drum it's supporting. So but in this situation the bush is actually pretty wide. There's a new bush there, and they're actually 385 thou wide, and when you have a look where it sits, yeah, you want it as close as you can to that step, but not touching the step. So we'll just knock that bush out now. Bush driver there fits snugly in there. There we go. Knocked out the bush. There it is there on the little selective driver. We'll give that a bit of a wash and then put the new one back in. And there it is, just level with the bottom of that little slot. So we'll just test it on the drum, just make sure it's not hitting the that little step. And we'll just test it. I'll just take that thrust washer off and just see how it feels. You can see how far down it goes. And if we put the thrust washer back on, and you can actually feel that it's hitting that thrust washer. That's okay. Got it all nice and clean. It's still a little bit oily from the solvent. And now I just remove, there's a little lip seal on the inside of that drum. I just use this little tool we made up with a bit of spring steel welded onto or soldered onto an old screwdriver. There we go. And there's a little lip seal. You can see it's got like a little skirt on it, and when it gets pressure underneath, that skirt will blow up like Marilyn Monroe's dress and seal and push that piston up. And we've got the piston, and that's got a lip seal on it as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to replace this outer, well, the bigger lip seal. And what I do is I put a rubber band on it just to pull it in, pull that lip in, so it's nice and flat up against that. And I put it in the freezer, and that rubber will harden long enough for me to just push it back into the drum. The lip seal that goes on here, we've actually got a little tool. I'll show you in a moment how we put that one on, but you could put it on with a screwdriver as well, I suppose, if you're very careful. Now we're just going to put the smaller seal in. Now you can see that one's got a little step, so we've got this little seal installer that my old man made years ago. And what you actually do is you put it on backwards like this. Well, not backwards, but and you just slide it to the end of it. That's the part that actually goes into the groove, and that's the little skirt or the lip. Okay, and you can see there's a little step inside that tool that just sits on the top of that little surface there, and we just put that down and just flip it in by hand, and there you go. Just make sure it's all in properly, and you can feel the skirt. You know, you can pull it up with your fingers. And it's all nicely in place there. We've got the outer one that goes on the piston. You can see the lip actually is opened up a lot more than the old one. I don't know if you can see that. This one's sort of flattened out a bit. So we just place that on there like so. Pull it on. Make sure it's seated nicely. See how the bottom of it hasn't fallen in? That's what we're actually feeling for when we're putting that inside that smaller seal as well. And just make sure it's all nicely in place. Then we actually use the old seal, and we pull that around and just work it right around, just so it's pressing on the outside of that lip. And just work it right to the edge, so it's pulling that lip right in. If you go too far, it'll just pop off like it just did. So I'll put that on again, and then I'll just throw this in the freezer for a little bit. There is a chamfer on there, which will help you push it in when you put it in anyway, but I'll just work this back on again. Okay, I've just smeared a bit of vaseline or petroleum jelly around the seals and on the bore there. The piston's been in the freezer for about 15 minutes. And we'll give it a crack. Oh, I probably didn't get it too quick enough. And we're going to do it a little bit quicker this time. It's a warm day today, so got to do it a bit quicker. There we go, and that's gone straight in. Now we just put the springs back in. And again, just making sure that that pointy pointy bit of the circlip is up towards the top or the outer side. The cushion plate, followed by a steel. Okay, now we've got this clutch pack nearly back together. Standard, the V8s came out with 6 friction clutch plates in them. We do a slight modification on the second drum, and we're able to fit 9 friction clutch plates. Or we can organise for you to send your second drum and your third drum, and we can do the modification for you to put the extra clutch plates in. What we do is we put 9 in the second drum, and we put 7 friction clutch plates in the third drum. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and do the third drum now. Now, how I mentioned before, the standard third clutch have basically 5 in the V8s. They have 5 clutch packs, 5 friction clutch plates. So we're going to actually get rid of this whole drum, and we've got one that is slightly modified that we do to be able to accommodate 7 clutch plates. So we'll just go ahead and just show you the assembly of that. Now here we've got the modified drum. I'm just going to pull it apart and just show you. It's the same as replacing the seals on the second drum, except that yeah, we've got another slightly smaller tool to fit this middle lip seal in on the piston. So I'll just quickly just pull that apart and just show you what we do. As before, we just remove the springs. This drum's been modified. We've just machined it like we do. Pop the piston out, and we're just going to give it a good clean. And we're also going to polish here where the stator support bush runs, because on these transmissions that bush actually is like a seal here. The apply for the third clutch is through this hole here. So if you've got that bush on the stator support, which is located in the pump here, that one there, if that one's worn, is slightly worn, you're going to get a pressure bypass, and you can burn out that clutch pack. So even with extra clutch plates, that's not going to save it if you haven't got a proper apply here. So anyway, we're just going to clean all this up, and then we can put it back together. Now I've got the drum there. There's a little lip seal in there that seals on the inside of the piston. What you do is you just sort of squeeze it, pinch it till it comes a bit raised on one side there. It's a little bit hard to see. Probably easier to do with the The old seals are a bit harder, or you can just chop them off. There we go. And just work it around. There we go. Again, my old man made this tool years ago to fit these. And you get the new seal, you flip it up so the skirt's out. Whoop. And just work it down to the end of this tool. Should have probably put a bit of oil on it, it's a little bit grippy. So, see, it's got the skirts opened out, and then we just place it. There's a little step in there if you can see it. And that goes down up to the groove, and then we just flip it on, and just make sure it's gone into the groove. The skirt hasn't gone into the groove, the inside of the seal's gone into the groove. You might have to sometimes just work it a little bit, just to make sure that it's in properly. There we go. Got the lip seal that goes on the piston. We'll just put that on, like so. And again, we're going to have to get an O-ring and put it on there, and put it in the fridge or freezer, just so the rubber stays down just until we can get it back in there. The O-ring on there, you can see it's pressed the lip nicely all the way down. Just one other thing to note, there's a little bleed ball there, which actually seals from the bottom up, so you can they do wear out occasionally. So what I like to do is just flip it upside down like that and just put a bit of solvent on it and just watch for it. If it just runs away quickly, it'll mean that it's leaking too much. The solvent's a lot thinner than what the oil will be anyway, so if it does take a little bit of time to run off, it means it's okay. Anyway, I'm going to put this in the freezer now, and then I'm going to put a little bit of petroleum jelly or vaseline there, and we're just going to pop that piston back in when it's ready. There we go. And go straight in. And we've got it back in the press. Make sure the circlip's got the point towards the top. There we go. there we go. We start with a friction, steel, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frictions in this one. I'm just going to go ahead and soak them in oil first before we put them in.